Well, thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. Now, the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has set aside parts of the findings made by Advocate Terry Motau in his VBS Great Heist Report against former African National Congress Limpopo Treasurer Daniel Msiza. Now, the court has declared that some of the findings made by Motau against Msiza were prejudicial and unconstitutional. It ruled that not giving Msiza the right of reply before Advocate Terry Motau's release of the Great Heist Report was unconstitutional and unlawful. The judgment comes a month after the ANC's decision to reinstate Msiza to his position after he was suspended 2 years ago by the ANC's Integrity Committee on allegations of corruption related to the VBS saga. And then 2 days ago, the ANC in Gauteng, their Integrity Committee, told the Merafong Mayor Maphefo Mogale-Letsie and former West Rand District Municipality Mayor Boyce Maneli, who also serves as ANC Member of Parliament and chairperson of the Communications Portfolio Committee in Parliament, to step down from their respective positions. The Gauteng PIC's investigation found that both men were negligent for failing to prevent corruption, even if they did not directly steal from VBS. Political analyst Ralph Mateja joins us now to discuss these matters further. Ralph Mateja, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to viewers. Thanks for inviting me.
So let's start with yesterday's court ruling. Does this judgment affirm Msiza's innocence?
Well, not at all, Sakina. What this judgment does is that it speaks to the procedure that was followed in producing the report by Advocate Terry Motau. There is no doubt that, this is almost a one-man report. Procedurally, one would imagine that it might not stick to the same level of scrutiny as it will be expected maybe of procedures in court and so forth. So what the judgment actually says is that Mr. Msiza should have been given the right of reply, should have been given procedurally the right to appear and air his side of the story. It does not talk to the substantive matters at hand here, Sakina, because if you look at the substantive matters at hand, the judge actually said that does not want to comment on the substantive matters. What that means is that the ethical issues relating to the VBS still stand, and it is not being challenged by the result of this judgment by any means.
So, speaking of the ethical issues, when the ANC reinstated Msiza and Florence Radzilana last month, the Secretary General said the two had not been charged with anything after 2 years. So, does what happened yesterday strengthen the organization in its position to not take action against anyone until proven guilty, firstly? And what does it say about the ANC's own posture when it comes to matters of integrity and ethics?
Sakina, this is the judgment of a court, and I can say that what it does is that it strengthens Mr. Msiza to survive politically, but it does not help the organization when it comes to the question of integrity, when it comes to the question of ethics. If one considers that Mr. Msiza is now an embattled politician who has had to go through all this process, so this judgment just gives him a sigh of reprieve as an individual. But as far as the ANC is concerned as an organization, the question of ethics remains unattended. The ANC has not taken a position. And Sakina, I might add as well that despite what has been done by the Integrity Committee of the ANC by pronouncing on this, the ANC has actually not undertaken an independent, rigorous inquiry into what actually happened at VBS. And maybe they should have appointed a council to establish it for themselves, but they've never done that. So it is now about the legalistic aspect of this. Legalistically, people have not been charged, no doubt about it. But ethically, people are at the scene where decisions that are bad have been made with implications on their constituencies. This is what the ANC should do. These are the type of leaders who make this type of decision that they want to continue to have within the party. That is not an issue that should be left to the court. It is not to be left to the court. It is a matter of the direction within the ANC, which seems to be pointing in a completely different place.
And this, of course, brings to center stage the ANC's Integrity Committee. And its powers, or perhaps the lack of power, the lack of bite that this committee seems to have? Because you look at what the Gauteng PIC has now decided, and what's your view on that in light of what has happened with Radzilana and Msiza?
Sakina, it is, I think, quite unreasonable to expect that the ANC Integrity Commission will be the only structure within the ANC that functions perfectly. If you look at the ANC structures, ANC members go to court to resolve internal dispute. This is because they've got no confidence in the functioning of their internal structures. The same logic applies to the functioning of the Integrity Commission. Even if it can be meant by people with integrity themselves, the reality is that it is part of the internal structures of the ANC that they have lost credibility. They are not being seen acting impartially. Even those who I believe, as I look at some of the recent decisions, even those who I believe that they've got a case to answer, I would actually support them when they are saying that, but why us? Why now? It is because of the level of inconsistency that the Integrity Commission has actually demonstrated. It looks like they wake up another day, they come up with this decision. I mean, let us quickly look at the decision in relation to the mayor of Johannesburg. I mean, strategically, my view is that there is no way that the Integrity Commission would have been impartial and resulted in the consequences that would have said the mayor has got to answer in relation to the regiment funds. I mean, strategically, it's just not a no-go area. So all of this thing, the issue here is just the ANC survival. So the Integrity Commission, it's also towing that line. Once in a while, wakes up to a surprising decision that people like. But the lack of consistency tells you that whenever you see a decision that you might like, it just might be an accident that is not well justified given other cases that have been mishandled or not even dealt with within this structure.
So, speaking to the VBS saga overall and gross violations of the Municipal Finance Management Act by these municipalities, but in terms of accountability, the accounting officers first and foremost, we haven't seen anybody really being held accountable, Ralph, at that level of bureaucracy. Neither have we really seen any political figureheads being held accountable either.
Quite often, Sakina, investigations such as this involving grand theft that is being institutionalized within the party, they result in, parties trying to manage the whole thing, trying to manage the public backlash. It ends up being written off as a big misunderstanding. It's like the state capture inquiry, Sakina, which is there are those who go there with the aim to say that, no, hold on, there's no problem here. You should not worry about individual culpability on what has happened. That is, you cannot hold any individual responsible. Therefore, you just write the whole thing as institutional lapse, and we all move on and wait for another episode, unfortunately. But in reality, you've got the NPA, you've got the Public Finance Management Act, which I know in and out, and it actually allows for people to go further and have consequences, go for assets, and even go for criminal probing into that. It all has to do with the political will, which seems not to be there. The only political will, Sakina, I see on this is the politicization of these issues in a manner that it makes it difficult for state authorities such as NPA to fairly and openly deal with these issues.
Let's speak to those state institutions like the NPA, like the SIU, like the Hawks, who all have a job to do. Why have they found it difficult to do their job, quite apart from what the ANC may or may not do?
I mean, Sakina, the reality is that if the governing party is indifferent towards corruption, of course, you can depend on the champions in those institutions to be able to try to further the work, try to further investigations and probing. But the reality is that the public mood, the political mood, not the public mood, I mean the political mood as you read it in terms of the direction of the governing party, is such that such investigations are not welcome. I mean, we have had reports of the Secretary General of the party coming out and saying these institutions are being used, such as the NPA, to fight political battle. His statement does not begin with saying we support the NPA to be independent. We want them to be independent. We also want to protect them from being used for malicious intent. The first line of entry is that the NPA is being used for, or these institutions are being used for political machination. That just doesn't set a good, I'll say, environment that inspires confidence in the fight against anti-corruption. So it all depends on those champions such as the head of the NPA, but there is just as much as people can do when the mood, the political wind does not favor what they try to do in their respective jobs.
Because quite apart from the Motau report, what sort of investigations have these entities undertaken independently? Because given all the evidence that has been ventilated in the public domain, surely there's something for them to go on there, Ralph?
There is something. There is a lot. South Africa has got a very complex banking system where we can easily trace the money. And these allegations that often come out, Sakina, most of these allegations that are facing people are not so complex. People get money. A couple of days down the line, they go buy cars. So the trail is still there. We are not looking at a very complex maneuvering in terms of corruption. Our corruption is still largely pedestrian. We can do something about it if we have a political will. If we wait for it to become complex, because now we are treating it as complex and it is not yet complex, I think we are going to lose the battle. But I have to say, Sakina, that at the end of the day, it remains with the courts, because when these institutions such as the NPA are having political pressure, when they are making decisions that at times they are not logical when it comes to decision to prosecute or not to prosecute, the court remains the final arbiter on reviewing those decisions. And my view here, Sakina, is that the court cannot hold. They've become a one-stop solution for anti-corruption in the country. It is just too much to overwhelm a single institutions with all of this. Hence, support should go to those other institutions.
So those other institutions, there have been claims in the past, Ralph, that these have been hollowed out. But then a new dawn was expected to set in, even in those institutions. What's happened to that?
Sakina, I've spoken to you a few times. I've never believed in the fantasy of a new dawn, because the problem within the ANC are institutionalized, and it is becoming clear that actually corruption is almost democratized across the factions within the ANC. You just end up with a polite faction and a rude faction, but you're still having a faction, you are still having a bad leadership. That is the reality that I think we are confronted with. Hence, the solution to South Africa, in my mind, does not rely on talking so much about leaders. It relies a lot on people understanding how the functioning of the NPA, how the functioning of the court, how the functioning of the Office of the Public Protector under proper leadership, enhance democracy. And these institutions' jobs are no longer abstract. They affect people's life on a daily basis. So we have to go back to just basically educating people and supporting this institution instead of chasing the dream of finding a perfect leader somewhere else within the existing political parties. That is undoable.
So listening to all of that, so you have all these commissions all over the place at various institutions, you name it, the PIC, ESCOM, SABC. We've got the State Capture Commission of Inquiry currently underway. Billions of rands later into all these investigations, Ralph. What does South Africa have to show for all that money spent?
Well, there is no honor in having commissions. I mean, we are about to have a commission on COVID-19 expenditure, Sakina. I mean, we know it's coming. It's just a matter of time until someone starts going to court and knocking and asking if we need to have that. And the reason we are having this commission, it is because of the failure of state institutions to function normally. Each and every time you hear a report of impropriety, you hear leaders saying that, oh, we are putting together this institution with this and that. And I often ask myself, are we admitting that in their normal existence, in the manner in which they've been legislated to function, these institutions such as SAP, such as crime intelligence, such as the intelligence agency, are they unable to help us to a point where we have to amass resources and club resources each and every time? At the end of the day, we are almost admitting that we are no longer functioning as a normal society. We are functioning with this commission. It is not good. They will not solve any problem. Well, the best thing I hope is that they reveal the truth so that South Africans can know the criteria that leaders take when they are making decisions. For me, Sakina, the success of the commission is not about people wearing orange overalls. It's because I know that it's unlikely to happen. But I think I'm betting on South Africans understanding how their democracy function, understanding the criteria of decision that is being followed by their leaders, and taking that information to the voting booth. That is what matters. I do not have much hope in a messianic leadership. I never did.
And perhaps just the final question, Ralph. Is there any institution across the state that is actually functional right now? And functional in the sense that it does what it needs to do, it holds people accountable as it should, and everything just seems to be working as it was envisaged to?
No pun intended, Sagina, but without any shadow of doubt, as the judges always say, the judiciary functions. And actually, it functions to a point where not only is it doing the job of the judiciary, it at times requested to step in and do the job of Parliament. I mean, where is Parliament when it comes to accountability on the COVID-19 and so forth and other areas? Most cases, we see people approaching the judiciary to actually demand the basic accountability that should have been meted by Parliament. So the judiciary, it functions. But I think that the political pressure that is gathering around this institution, it will make its tenure or maybe its function almost untenable. It is just too much for a single institution. It is almost getting too involved or being spoken about on a daily basis in our politics. That's just too much.
So let's park it there. Thanks so much, Ralph, for your time. Political analyst Ralph Matega discussing the court ruling and developments within the ANC and around the VBS saga with us. Let's take a quick break before we get to news.